everyone. Welcome to the Fed's General Meeting. Was that a bit loud? Should I talk quieter? We're good? That's good? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go through some slides in this presentation just as a Fed's update on kind of some things we're doing as an exec team and what's happening overall. And then we'll go straight into the agenda, approval hopefully, and start the meeting. Any questions before we start? Perfect. Left and right, Chris? Up and down, maybe? Oh, there? Oh. There we go. Next one. Okay, some important notes. We'll be following Robert's Rules of Order. We'll hopefully keep to as strict as we can with making the meeting go efficiently as possible. So if you have any questions on how it works, please let me know. We can always suspend it just to ask the question. And then speech should be directed through myself, the chair. So my name's Danielle Burt, and I'm the president of Federation of Students. And we use last names if we're going to address anybody. So just keep that as best as you can. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, right into the Fed's update. So these are some initiatives that we've started as an exec team. We have specifics in each of them. So mental health, we've started a peer support group with health services and counseling services. Sustainability, we're working on some initiatives across campus in food and energy savings. In space, we're going to be working with the university on a space working group to actually look at student space on campus. Fall reading break, we've also looked into some details around that, and we have a referendum coming up on November 4th to 6th. And then finally, we have a new entrepreneurship committee, which is all the details are on our website. So Fed's conducted a governance review. We'll have a presentation a little later in the meeting, so you can hear what that's all about. And we also have a representative from the company here. As requested, you may have heard this, by USA, our provincial lobbying group. The government has announced increased funding from the Mental Health Innovation Fund, which is great to hear. And Feds participated in the Vibrant Student Experience theme of the strategic plan, so we've had a mini town hall as well as some student consultation. And some of those portals, space, and community are issues we've brought up. Last but not least, we've increased elections engagement through Feds marketing, advanced polls, and engagement. And then we've also improved the relationship with the Student Success Office. We've created an advisory group that has student consultation with Feds, so we can actually talk to each other and see what we're doing. We've created a club support team, and we have 2 new student services, so ICSN and Co-op Connection, which are going fantastically. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to visit the exec office hours or information on our website. Carly. International Canadian Student Network. There we go. Thank you, Carly. Any questions from anybody else on the floor? Perfect. Okay. Chris has disappeared. There he is. Okay, he's going to put up the agenda. Did I click again? There we go. Okay, so first I'm going to call this meeting to order. First on the agenda is to actually approve the agenda. So can I have a mover for that? Patel? And a seconder? Oh, sorry, there's people in the back. Seconder? Crane? Cool, thank you. Is there any debate on the agenda? Perfect. So are you moving that as an amendment? Okay. So do you have any problems if we leave the governance review there because we do have a guest? Is that fine? Or do you want to continue? That's fine. So you want to move. I'm going to recognize the chair of the board to make a comment.
Can I ask that we keep the financial statements because that's something we legally have to do at this meeting? Like everything else is like we can kind of do, but that's something that needs to happen. So I'd rather that happen first.
So we want to move 6, 7, and 8 before 5. Are you sure? do it. So you're formally moving this. Okay, can I get your last name?
Beverly Foster.
Okay. Can I have a seconder for that amendment?
Alhamdawi.
Okay. All those in favor of that amendment to the agenda? Are we counting? That would be great. Really high in the air, folks. There you go. All those opposed? Abstentions? And motion passes. So we are amending that. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 5, 9. Good? Okay, so back to the approval of the agenda. Are we now good with the agenda being changed to that? All those in favor of the agenda? All those opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Perfect. Okay, so first on the actual agenda, approval of the minutes from the October 2013 and March 2014 general meeting. Do we have a seconder to move this motion? Ku. Does anybody have any debate on this? No? All those in favor of moving the minutes? All those opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Okay, so we're going on to the Federation of Students financial report. So I'm going to call up Cheryl, our accounting manager, to actually present the statements, and then we'll do the vote to actually pass it. Thank you, Cheryl. Would you like individual mic? Yeah, some part of my...
Are we good? Okay. So today I'll be speaking about the two main financial statements for our organization, the statement of financial position, also known as the balance sheet, and the statement of operations or income statement. The statement of financial position shows the value of the items we own, the items we owe to others, and our net assets, also what used to be known as retained earnings for our organization. The statement of operations shows the results of our operations for a year, i.e. whether we had a profit or loss for the year. There are several funds shown on our statements. The first is the general fund. This is where the fee of $48.51, that's what it was in 2013-2014, is allocated. All of our operations for our commercial services, International News, Bomb Shelter, Wasabi, Campus Bubble, the used bookstore, Student Life Center, and all our services, so the clubs area, services, campus life budgets, and governance budgets also flow through this fund. All monies are free to be spent as we as a corporation see fit. The dental health UPass student refugee program and the orientation funds are separated because the student fees collected for these funds are restricted. This means the funds must be spent only on their specific purpose. For example, the health and dental fund money can only be spent on premiums and the cost to administer those specific funds. So I can't go and buy a piece of equipment for the general fund out of the dental fund's money. It has to be kept separate. So a couple of quick highlights are our net worth increased by $1 million. There was a $93,000 gain on our investments. Discontinued operations no longer exist. And overall for the year, we have a $66,000 loss. So highlights for the statement of financial position, our cash increased by $800,000. $525,000 of that was in the general fund, and this is because last year we had our receivables were higher by $525,000, and that money was paid off in the year. Inventory has increased by $45,000. The general fund portion is about $35,000. The majority of that relates to inventories for the Student Life Center and inventories in international news now that it's gone 24/7. Prepaids have increased by $745,000 overall. The majority of that relates to the health and dental plan, and that is because of the student care has changed the way in which they bill. Capital assets have decreased by $88,000. A large chunk of that is in the general fund. It's about $126,000. That means that our assets are being used up, and we haven't bought a lot of new assets as of late. Long-term investments have increased $119,000 over last year. This is because of gains in interest. Our accounts payable was increased to $316,000. Student Life Center taking on their bills was part of it, as well as some UW invoices that we were late in paying. So overall, it results in a net worth increase of $1 million. If you can page through. One more. So this is our statement of operations, used to be known as an income statement. Some highlights for that is revenues have increased $2.5 million over last year. The general fund is up $1.9 million. Majority of that relates to the sales from the Student Life Center that weren't in our books last year but are this year. Society sales as a total, all of them grouped together, have gone up $66,000. The rest of it is due to increases in the health and the dental fund revenues. Cost of sales have increased in total. Well, cost of sales and operating expenses as a whole have gone up $3.2 million. 1.4 is in the general fund. A large chunk of that, again, is related to the Student Life Center being accounted for in our books this year. Dental and UPass have both gone up by $300,000 each, and societies have increased about $25,000. The student fee amount has increased $319,000 over the previous year. The majority of that is in the general fund, and the majority of that is due to the fact that we now charge part-time students a portion of our fee that we weren't doing in previous years. The big item to note is in the donations and other line, there is a significant decrease of $577,000. $572,000 of that's in the general fund, and if any of you were here last year, that's because last year we had several agreements settled with the university, and therefore we had 3 different items that were in that area. One was the settlement of our Tim Hortons agreement, the other was settlement with Canada Day, and the third one is the Student Life Center settlement as well. As I spoke to last year, if we had removed that money, there actually would have been a loss last year of $45,000. So when we look at the loss this year of $66,000, they're pretty much close to being in the same line. And lastly, as I noted earlier, gain on investments was $34,000 last year, and it's $93,000 this year, so we're taking advantage of the increase in the markets. I just have another note. I just have to... So the audited statements in their entirety will be posted online at feds.ca, as well as the results for your individual society. If you want to take a look at those will be posted on the website. And if you have any questions, you're free to come and ask me at the front desk and make an appointment. Any questions from anyone?
Let's give it up for Cheryl. Woo! That was some exciting stuff. Okay, so do I have a mover to move the approval of the audited financial statements? We have Turner, we have a seconder, Little, And do we have any? Sorry? Yep. Five seconds. There we go. It does not. So, mover, Turner, would you like to move to approve the financial statements? Anyways. Okay. We good to go? Yes. Yes. So, are we not in favor then of moving this?
My question is just to, were we not supposed to be, if it's a decision to approve, then were we not supposed to be provided with the documents that we're supposed to approve, i.e. the audited financial statement, in order to give the membership time to look over it, and given that at the time of the notice for the meeting?
So at the time they were in draft form, but I'm going to hand it over to the board of the chair to comment on that.
So I think the term approving the audited statements is a little bit misleading. It's not that we're approving them, it's just that we're accepting them. Board approves them, like as required by law, and then the general membership just accepts that board has done so. We accept the audited statements. There's nothing that we're approving.
And then do they get approved at the general meeting in March? Is that where the approval happens by the general membership?
There's no approval by the general membership. It's approved by board and then just accepted by the general membership.
Does that answer your question? Perfect. Okay. So we will just keep it as a presentation as said on the agenda, and it's been approved at board. And now we have that presentation from Cheryl, so thank you, Cheryl. Okay, our second presentation on the agenda, we have the Federation of Students Governance Review Report. So Chris, if you could throw that up on the screen, I'm going to go through it very high level, and then if you have any questions, specifics on it, we're going to bring up our representative from Global Governance Advisors. So this process was started earlier this year in 2014, and we hired an external company to actually conduct a governance review so that we could see where our governance stands and where we need to make improvements. So then the company gave us a recommendation report, and this is the high-level report for the review. Okay. Like this is. Okay, so some of the consultation we did to conduct this review is we interviewed 20 individuals between the executive, board, council, senior staff, and UWHR. And then we reviewed 25 official governance documents of feds, as well as some audited meetings of Students' Council, Board of Directors, and general meetings over the last year. So there's many things that make feds unique. We do rotate on an executive term as well as council and board every year. So we have sometimes little experience and execs have less experience than the staff, which is an interesting scenario compared to a company. Is it just loading? Do you see it on your screen? Is Pratik at the back? Hi, Pratik. Would you know why I don't see the rest of the slides? There was the cover slide. Pause for technical difficulties. Okay. Okay, so next. Okay, so community strength. We have a large community within FEDS between all the student volunteers. Next. And so the recommendations fell into 3 categories: communication, accountability, and focus. So those were the main areas that there was recommended improvements, change, or differences. Next. We'll start with communication. Again, I'm going to go through this a bit quickly. This will be posted on our website, and if you have any specific questions of anything you see, we'll call up our representative. So general findings, and every interviewee noted that communication could or should improve and that it is key to the success of FEDS. So we're going to be working to establish an annual business plan to help initiate communication with staff and help board strategic oversight. So that's something that's happening at the board level. And then the president should meet on a regular basis with imprint and board and council chairs, which I do, and utilize student counselors, which we also try and do. Board of Directors, the chair should meet with the president. Again, this is a bit repeated for the specific audiences. Non-board members should not attend meetings. Again, this is all recommendations from the company. All agendas, minutes, decisions should be publicly posted. Chair should meet with imprint on a regular basis. And next. Students' Council, counselors should communicate with constituents, attend society meetings, regularly report on items, issues, and actively collect opinions, submit updates. All agendas, minutes, decisions should be publicly posted. Chair should meet with the student newspaper on a regular basis and should create a communication policy, which Student Council is working on right now, and it will be passed at the next meeting. Faculty societies, utilize your counselors to represent views and opinions. Full-time staff, get to know the executive and board members, educate your role, feed into the annual business plan, and attend training. And so earlier this year, we actually had a meet and greet within board, council, our staff, and this presentation. So that was great. We had it in Balmer. Imprint, this was a recommendation for student newspaper, although it's not part of our governance. It was still part of the relationship and communication. So again, meet with the president and chairs on a regular basis, provide ongoing updates, provide fair and balanced information. So we'll move on to accountability. So every aspect of the governance community could use additional accountability. If you can't live with this, then you shouldn't be in your position. Interesting, strong quote. So the executive team establish an annual business plan. So we are working with board to do a business plan, but we have our own executive action plan, which is posted on our website if you'd like to take a look. We have to communicate goals and objectives, report on progress and overall success, and president should meet with those people once again. So we should have smarter goals, and you can read the acronym there. And so those goals within our accountability structure, within our action plan and any business plan documents should incorporate those aspects of it. Board of Directors, operate within the parameters set out within established policies. All materials should be out 7 days before meetings. Chris is lovely and does that. Promptly post all agendas, minutes, and decisions, and chair should meet with imprint on a regular basis. Students' Council, again, very similar, keeping accountability towards our policy, keeping deadlines with agendas, meeting minutes, and meeting with important stakeholders. Faculty societies, again, just to drive it home, use your counselors. Make sure they provide regular updates and represent the views and opinions of your constituency. Full-time staff play a greater role in establishing an annual business plan, and so our staff work with us to create our exec action plan. If they're involved in any of the goals, we work with them. And again, student newspaper, similar issues that we talked about in communication, but provide fair and balanced information and provide ongoing updates and meet with the president and chairs. And last but not least, our third is focus. So we'll go through that. General findings, you have all the elements of a good governance structure. Focusing your efforts will go a long way. So our governance is pretty concise, and so our main areas of focus to improve in the review were on communication and accountability. So executive team, responsible for day-to-day business activities, trust outside groups to carry out their responsibility, and learn how to establish a strong annual business strategy. So we have to learn to trust our constituents, our stakeholders, and our staff to help us achieve our goals. Board of Directors, responsible for strategic oversight of the business operations. So again, that goes into the creation of a business plan. Trust outside groups to carry out their responsibilities, provide board training, which is done in my portfolio, and then provide facilitation training for the chair. Students' Council, responsible for the collection and communication of student interests, provide policy writing and evaluation training, and provide facilitation training for the chair. So again, all of those are mostly done through my portfolio with the training aspects, and responsible for collection and communication of student interests. So we do that through policy and procedures and any initiatives that are brought through council. So getting started. So here's where some of the recommendations come from. So this is a community effort. I'll let you read through those. And seek out training that you need. So if you do not know something, we do expect that our governance volunteers, staff, just tell us that they don't know, and we can help them and get the training we need. Be part of positive change. So we want our students and stakeholders and volunteers to reflect on why they are in their position. So this is Brad Kelly. I'm going to invite Brad Kelly to come up and say thank you for putting this presentation together. And if you have any specific questions, I'll direct it through Brad. Thank you, Brad. You want to introduce yourself?
First off, are there any questions regarding our study? Anything? I guess the biggest point is this is a community that you all need to work for, and I'll try and improve. There were some problems in governance, and as I said in there, it's a community effort. And if you don't want to strengthen the accountability or the focus of your organization, then really you should question why you're in the positions that you're in. Because I can tell you, I've been here. I actually started at University of Waterloo in 91. I was here from 91 to 97. I was involved in student government the whole time. All these positions, all the full-time staff positions, have been vetted over years. So there's a purpose for all of them. And so you need to try and find that purpose and make sure that you're in that role to the best of your ability. Brad, you have a question? I believe that's an issue that is going to be debated later. Okay, so I'll defer that till later. I'd be more than happy to give my opinion later on at that very moment, but right now we'll defer that one. That's a good point. Yes? He asked why should board meetings be closed, which was not actually on that overview there. So that they should be closed? Did I have it in there? Okay, so that was the question, but that is going to be a formal item on the agenda later on. Okay? Any other questions? No? Yes.
Just wondering if there's any findings. You guys are global governance advisors. If there's anything in terms of the organizational structure with the way the board is formed or who sits on the board and approval of operations from that standpoint. If there's any work conducted in that area.
So you're, as I noted up front, you're a unique, very unique organization where you are kind of, I would categorize you very much like a fraternal organization. So you have the communal aspect of what's going on in terms of student issues, student representation, but then you also have the business aspect. And so that's one of the reasons why you have broader council that has constituents from all your various faculties. And then you also have an actual board which is focused on primary business objectives of the organization. Okay? So in terms of the general election process, you could say, yes, you need to have a skills matrix, and you need to identify what are the skills elements you need on your board and how do you actually identify those in your community, but you don't have that privilege. Okay? So this is something that can't be changed, or I wouldn't even recommend it be changed because of the churn in your organization on a regular basis. It would be very difficult for you to actually implement some of these tried and true practices within the broader business community. But you're right, a lot of these are observationally based. And the reason for that is it's just to remind you of what are your actual roles and how do you actually take those roles and fulfill them in the best of your ability. Okay? Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, what sort of activities of the board do you like label as being business oriented as opposed to community oriented?
Well, the
in your
board
answer.
is primarily business focused. Because
Right, what sort of activities, though, like, can you divorce from community interest in those activities?
So in this situation, we looked at the primary responsibilities of your council, which is to look at the policies and procedures within your organization, within your community, that reflect the views and interests of all your various faculties as well as your student interest groups, right? And then you have your board that's primarily focused on the financials, the broader business objectives, negotiating and managing all your business contracts, the relationship between the school's students and the university. So the division between the policies and procedures and the views and objectives is divided from the actual business objectives of the actual executive and board. Okay? Anything else? Right there, Matt?
With times changing, did you see any positions? I know you said every position is important. They've been tried and true. Are there any that you saw that were either like repetitive or any positions that needed more assistance?
Primarily, we saw the position of the president as being watered down in terms of not having a specific scope or span of leadership responsibility. So with the previous president, with David, he was more of a liaison, glorified liaison, so to speak. We think that presidential position should be bolstered a bit more so that there's more accountability within the executive to the president, so that it's more of a typical management or leadership style as opposed to something that has kind of a weak figurehead like the United States. Sorry to make that correlation, but it's true. It's true.
Do you mind if I add on? And like, I mean, a few of us here, like myself, have been in this sort of same position as Danielle in a very, I guess, diverse organization. Like, what specific recommendations did you give to that to improve that sort of situation, to make her more of a manager and more people accountable to her? Or the position itself, sorry.
Well, there should be more of a hierarchy within the executive structure itself. So you have your elected executives, but right now they work kind of as a team of equals. And so the other executives have defined roles in terms of responsibilities that they're elected for. The president is kind of a broader figurehead. And the president really should have a broader leadership role in terms of overseeing those other portfolios to make sure that they're being adhered to as properly as possible. Now, but that being said, I don't know the actual specifics around the organizations that you're talking about. Every organization is unique, and that's why you have to take kind of a unique view of all organizations. You may be in a flat organization where you have all hands on deck, so your executive is really kind of your entire staff, and everyone has to work together as a team of equals. So I can't speak specifically to what you're thinking, but that was our view and opinion of the current executives. Anything else? Any questions on the accountability side? I'd like to get into that. Anything? No? Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brad. Okay, so we are now going on to number 6. No, you switched it? Okay, number 5. So approval of board meetings change. Do we have a mover for this motion? Or do we have the person who moved this or put this motion on? Is he here? Andrew Reeves? No? Okay. Do we have a mover for this motion?
Thomas Little.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for the motion? He switched them, yeah. Sorry, was there a seconder? Were you seconding?
Yeah. Hannah Enns.
Perfect. So we'll start. If there's any debate on this motion, we can have yes on this side. So you're in favor of this motion and against the motion on this side. Is there any debate on this motion? Yep, I'll read it for the record. So, whereas the Board of Directors is the chief decision-making body of the Federation of Students, whereas the Board of Directors recently closed their meetings to the public and students are no longer able to attend board meetings, whereas undergraduate students are the chief shareholders in the Federation of Students and the Board of Directors manages over $2.5 million of student funds annually, whereas the decision to close meetings of the Board of Directors has a negative impact on students and decreases transparency within the Federation of Students, be it resolved that students charge the Federation of Students Board of Directors to reopen their meetings to students effective immediately, and be it further resolved, Students' Council establish a policy for when the Board of Directors may use confidential sessions during meetings. Does anybody need me to repeat anything? I'm going to invite the chair of the board to speak to it, and then if Brad wants to make any comments after that, we can invite him up. Sorry?
Is the member that moved the motion going to
Yeah,
speak?
so we'll
after?
have the mover of the motion. If you'd like to speak with it, you don't have to. Oh, you're over here. You moved on me. If you'd like to speak to it, and then we'll have the chair of the board speak.
Well, first, I'd like to apologize on behalf of Andrew. He had a midterm, so he couldn't be here. But I'd also like to restate what he said to Imprint, which is that it's really sad that this motion had to come forward. It's a really basic thing in an organization that the members should be able to see what kind of decisions the board of directors are making. And these board meetings have been open for years, and it's only just recently that they've been closed. So I see it, and Andrew sees it, as a step back in transparency, which doesn't seem to mesh with the transparency platform. So I don't really understand why this was done, but we should have it back the way it was.
Thank you. And I'm going to invite the chair of the board, Chris Lolis, up to speak to it.
Hello, as she said, I'm Chris Lolis, I'm chair of the board. Notice I'm not on either side because the statement I'm about to read does not take a side. So last night the board of directors passed this motion, which is just to say that we'd like to endorse this statement. So the statement is as follows. The Federation of Students Board of Directors has numerous responsibilities, ranging from the financial to human resources to legal and contractual matters. As such, meetings of the board must be dealt with in a serious manner, both for directors and the general membership of FEDS. In the 2013-2014 board term, meetings included an open session, where anyone could attend the meetings in the gallery. Prior to that year, all meetings were conducted in closed session. That is, only members of the board and invited guests were permitted to attend meetings. During open meetings, parts of the meetings remained in confidential session, as the nature of certain discussions are required to be private either by law or by the best interests of the corporation, such as when discussing negotiation strategies for the university, where it would be highly detrimental to have a gallery in attendance. Then, within the same 2013-2014 board term, a committee was formed to evaluate all aspects of board meetings. Among numerous recommendations was one to return to closed board meetings because the committee felt over the previous year that the presence of a gallery created a disorderly atmosphere during the meeting. After considerable discussion, this recommendation was made and subsequently adopted by the board. Both the Fed's lawyer and the recent Independence Governance Review strongly advised closed meetings. All of this being said, the board of directors recognizes there is a push from students to have board meetings open to the membership. As per our charter of incorporation, the Federation of Students exists, quote, to promote the welfare and interests of the students of the University of Waterloo, end quote. If it is determined that the general membership of this corporation, after considering arguments from both sides of the discussion, wishes for board meetings to be open, then the board shall do so. Indeed, all current directors were elected at a time when meetings were open. None of the current members of the board agreed to their position on the condition that meetings be closed. Regardless of the outcome of this motion, the directors shall continue to uphold their fiduciary duty to the Federation of Students and serve students of this university as best we can. Sincerely, the Board of Directors, Federation of Students, University of Waterloo.
Thank you very much, Chris. Do we have any further debate? Again, being for this motion or against this motion? We have someone? If you'd like to announce your name just for the record.
I'm Adam Savage. I'm against open meetings as I work for the university, and I'm against open meetings as I work for the university and have been in the workforce for a long time. As soon as you open up meetings to a larger audience, the results of the meeting are much less positive. You get a lot less accomplished, a lot less done, and in terms of our board of directors, I think these meetings should remain closed, and we still have this open forum here in which you can participate in. I would also like to hear from Mr. Kelly on what his recommendations were for the closing of the board meetings.
Thank you. So we'll hear from this side, and then we'll go to Brad.
Hannah Enns. I appreciate your comment. However, I would also like to state again that you said you work for the corporation, and so I just want to say that what's that?
He works for the university.
Yes. I don't work for feds. I work for the university.
Okay, you work for the university. You work for the university, and students' governance should be a decision made by students. So I appreciate your...
I'm a student as well.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify. I'd also like to speak to the motion as well. So given that students' money is going to this, it should be open for students to be able to be there and participate in the conversation. Again, that increases accountability. It invites students also to be a part of what is happening. It also can be used in educational period for students who are interested in getting involved in board of directors in the future. That way, if meetings are open, then you can go and see how this process actually happens. Also, if you're considering being a board of directors at the university, maybe it's a good idea to go beforehand and actually see what happens within a meeting. Therefore, you're actually going into a meeting or going into that role more knowledgeable as to what that role actually entails. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now.
Thank you. So I'm going to invite Brad up before we have any other. Do you have a specific, point of order, point of information, anything? Okay, so if you're for or against, then you should come up. Can you state if you're for or against, unless you want to come up?
I can come up. I don't know if I'm against. Okay, I just wanted to. Ooh, you were tall.
Can you state your last name, just for the record?
Yep, McCready. So I'm a Feds counselor on the council, and I would just like to speak to the point about students attending board of directors meetings. So right now on council, I have seen 0 students sitting in the gallery at our council meetings, except for those who are wishing to be elected or appointed to positions within council, like on our committees, to speak to that. So I understand the desire to have meetings be open for transparency or democracy, but to in my past experience as a counselor at our council meetings for the past approximately 6 months, there have been no students at our council meetings and very little interest in actually physically arriving at meetings. We've seen lots of comments online, but it is very disappointing to see very, very few, very, very close to 0 students coming up to meetings.
Okay, so before I recognize this side, we are going to invite Brad up because there was a request to hear his recommendation.
As was noted in our presentation there, we did a very deep dive. Normally when we do a board assessment, we'll meet with maybe 5 to 7 board members in total, and that in its entirety gives us enough information to really assess how the organization is functioning. Here we went through 20 individuals, we looked at your council, we looked at the role of the imprint, and if you noticed, a whole section was based on accountability, increasing accountability. So I'm shocked that you're raising such a major issue around something that is not universal for boards that are focused on business issues, but you don't hold your counselors accountable at all. You elect them through your societies. They may show up, they may not show up. They may give good information to the council, they may not give good information to the council. They may or may not be asked to provide good, effective, concise overviews in your society meetings. That is the process that you need to strengthen. So right now, your executive board deals with issues that, due to their fiduciary duties, can be liable. They can be liable for discussing things like financial statements that haven't been properly vetted, HR issues, personnel issues, compensation issues, all of which, if they get out into the public forum, they actually can be sued. And so basically this is a protection for your board to allow them to fully vet these issues without people sitting behind them. One of the comments that I made to the board was that, I thank God that I was on student council prior to Twitter and Facebook and all of these things, because people can actually sit in meetings and tweet things out before they actually haven't been vetted. So what I found through my interviews with 20 individuals is that a lot of them were holding back and not fully participating in the meetings because they were scared to actually voice their true opinion because of people sitting in the gallery. And that is not an effective board. An effective board basically depends on the views and opinions of all of the people who are on the board, and that's why you elected them. That's your democratic process. It's where you vet your representatives, and they are now in that room representing your interests, your best interests. And if they can't do it to the best of their abilities, then you're actually stagnating, or you're actually truncating their overall effectiveness on your board. So if you notice, communication should be increased. Accountability with your counselors should be increased. Council should be more effectively utilized, and that the communication between the societies and the council and the executive and the board need to be improved. Relationships with the imprint, the role of the imprint is tantamount to this. And so they need to play a positive role in this as well, in terms of keeping your board, keeping the exec accountable in a more positive way. Okay? So my view and my recommendation is, if you close the meetings and allow your executive and your board members to truly discuss and vet issues with the protection that they can speak their mind and truly explore all the options, and then collectively come up with a result, then you're actually increasing the overall effectiveness of your board, and then increasing the communication and the reporting after that, and the attendance in this meeting. I would suggest you look at the attendance in these meetings too, right? If you want people to be more accountable, if you want to increase communication, you need to actually be part of the solution. You need to actually step up and get involved. And I apologize because I'm actually preaching to the choir here, because you're here. You're all here. But it's the mass that isn't here that is more of the problem, that I think, and if you talk about getting involved and maybe wanting to sit on board, wanting to become part of the exec, or wanting to be on council, actually strengthening the communication between council, getting your councilors to actually participate in societal meetings more effectively. I think that is what is going to actually increase the overall interest in your first years, your second years, so that by the time they're in third or fourth year, they're ready to step up and take more of a leadership role. Okay? That may be a utopian view, but that is our views and the recommendations that we provided. Now, are there any questions around that? Any questions? Yes.
So how the board is structured now, it's a closed meeting and invited guests are allowed. What is the structure, not structure, what is the, what are the rules for guests in that regard?
So are you talking about it being the current situation or what he's recommending?
With closed board.
So what he's recommending?
Yeah.
So typically, the typical current best practice is when an outside individual is being asked to participate in a board meeting, they're asked to participate because they're a subject matter expert in one particular area that the board is actually trying to vet or address. They are invited in, and usually it's approved by the chair and the president, the chair and the executive director, or whoever the top executive is, and then that person is normally invited to come in and attend that one agenda item and only that one agenda item, and then they're politely asked to step out after that. That is the current best practice. I don't know what the current situation is, but that would be our.
Would you like to hear from the chair of the board of what currently is happening?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, so specifically for invited guests, the process is similar to what he said. So I, as the chair, can invite a specific person for the specific motion, who's an expert in that field, and then they would leave during the rest of it. However, I can be overturned by the majority of the board as well. So if I say that this person I don't feel is an expert in the subject and should not be allowed to attend, the rest of the board can say no, they should, and it's just a majority vote.
Does that answer your question?
Add one more.
You may add one more thing, Brad.
I should add, and I didn't properly introduce myself at the beginning. I'm the partner and co-founder of Global Governance Advisors. We're a board advisory firm. We have offices all throughout North America since 2009. So we've expanded very quickly because of the focus and the importance of governance and compensation management throughout our North American economy. That being said, I work with hundreds of boards. The most effective boards are the ones that have closed meetings. They're able to get stuff done. They're able to speak their minds. There could be a lot of discussion, dissension between the board members, various views. I think that's important. But the most ineffective boards that we deal with are the ones that actually are publicly televised. Because then you get posturing, you get people who are saying things that they may not necessarily believe, or they may just be speaking because they feel they need to speak, and the meetings tend to ramble on for eternity, but they never actually address the true issues. Or they never get to the true opinions of the members because they're afraid of the either misinterpretation or issues around, vetting their true feelings. And I think if you were to look at the broad spectrum of organizations that we deal with, again, our recommendation is closed meetings are the most effective as long as you have the strong accountability measures around it to strengthen communication to make sure that that group of individuals are being held accountable.
Do we have any more debate against or for this motion? We have one for this motion. If you'd just like to say your name for the record.
Yeah, Dave Beverly Foster. I'd like to speak a bit to what some of the against the motion speakers have said in regards to the board culture and how people feel when they're participating. I think it was you, I believe you said, what was it? That it becomes disorderly when students are listening. And yet we heard from a counselor as well that students aren't going anyway. And so I'm not sure where that conflict comes from. I want to speak a bit to the board as a business as opposed to the board as organizing the Federation of Students, which I think should be its primary role. The motion is that we can set up a policy to have certain closed meetings if that meeting needs to be closed for whatever legal purposes, but otherwise the default should be that it's open. And I apologize that if you feel having students hearing what you're saying at the meetings oppresses your ability to speak your mind, but that's honestly a bit how I feel as a student, having to discuss a motion whether or not I'm able to hear what you're saying. I feel like my ability to participate in these things becomes limited by my inability to actually go to the meetings. And finally, I'd like to speak a bit to student turnout and student interest and student participation in this stuff. I'm not sure that the way we increase student interest in participating in governance is by limiting their ability and their number of opportunities to participate or to listening to what's happening. Thank you.
Is there any other for or against? You're speaking? Okay, if we could just try and not directly talk to someone else, that'd be great. Okay.
My name is Ben Balfour. So as a board member, I can speak to the feeling of not being able to voice my opinion fully, ask questions about things that I don't feel comfortable and I don't have the knowledge about. So Brad made the point very well, but when we look at the board that we have and we look at the millions of dollars that are being flowed through this board, it's important that we can ask the questions that maybe are stupid, that we think are dumb, but that we're not being judged by the people sitting around the outside of the table. So that is my point to that one. We also, in terms of the things that go on within the board, we are posting agendas beforehand. We are posting minutes after, which in all circumstance gives the students what we're doing. It says how and why we are making the decisions that we're making, even though you don't necessarily need to be in the meeting. I think I would really just like to reiterate Brad's point about council being the place where we need to improve the amount of communication. When you look at the structure of the Federation of Students and the role that board plays versus the role that council plays, council is the place where policy and procedure are created, where student opinion is voiced and is then acted upon by the Federation of Students. The board is where business happens. So this is a business. Sorry, I'm addressing him. I shouldn't be addressing him. Sorry. I'm not trying to be confrontational at all, but this is a business. At the end of the day, we are running a corporation. We run this building. We run several commercial operations. We have over 25 full-time staff, which we must ensure that we are taking care of their HR responsibilities and duties. There's a lot of legal things that go on in this business outside of the forward-facing events and clubs and services that students see on a regular basis. So when we look at the role of board, taking care of that stuff, the not-so-fun stuff, and council being able to, the place where students can vet their opinion and have their voice heard, we really need to recognize the duty that each of those bodies have and how we can allow them to properly and most efficiently operate. So that's why I am speaking against the motion to open up board. I feel that closed board is the best way to go. So, yeah.
Do we have anybody else who's speaking for or against this motion? We're just going to address this side just because you have already spoken. So we have a new speaker.
Hello. My name is Kumar
Your last name for the record?
Patel. I'm a current staff member of the Federation of Students and a former executive for 2 years and a former board member for 3 years. I sat in on 3 years worth of board meetings from 2011 to almost the end of 2011, 2012, and 2013, so we have those 3 years. And I've also sat on council since 2010, and many years I've spent in working for this organization. And let me say that a lot of the times, as what Ben said, Mr. Pelfor spoke of, when it comes to what the board does, a lot of it is HR, it's the financials, it's the strategy. Let me tell you one thing. We almost took 2 years to come up with the resolution for the Fed Hall dispute, and that 2 years was.
If you could just keep it
to
the actual motion.
Well, I'm giving an example of something that we worked on. The Fed Hall dispute took nearly 2 years to do in closed doors. There was a lot of strategy, a lot of personnel and HR aspects that concerned that matter. Now, it took us 2 years with the amount of people that were on the table because there was a lot of strategy, for example, for that issue itself. Now, had we had those meetings open, we would not have gotten any compensation for Fed Hall. We wouldn't be sitting in this building as the managers and the owners of this building. Just because when you have more people on the table, you can't speak to. It's harder to get decisions done, make decisions. The other half of it is the personnel. It is the strategy that we use. When we're dealing with administrators and personnel, those are a lot of sensitive issues. And when people's jobs and their livelihoods are at stake, staff members, it could set us up for a lot of liability that our organization can't afford to take on. We're not a $100 million corporation like Walmart, and they can just close a store and that staff member is no longer there anymore, for example, an operation, and they can absorb that cost. Unfortunately, we're not in that situation, and we're not in it for that either. We're here for the students. We want to maintain the financial integrity of our organization. I really, really, really do advise you guys to vote this down. Against, right? Against, yeah. Thank you.
Do you have a point of information or point of... Okay, we have a call to question. So this has to pass by 2/3 for us to actually stop the debate. And should it pass, we will then move right until voting for this motion. So there'll be no further debate should it pass. If not, we will continue debate. So, are we all good? We have our placards. All those in favor of calling the question? All those opposed? Abstentions? And no abstentions. So it passes? 2/3, we're good? Okay. So it passes, so we're calling the question. So now we are voting either in favor or against this motion on the table. Does anybody want me to read it out again? Read it out again? Okay, whereas the Board of Directors is the chief decision-making body of the Federation of Students, whereas the Board of Directors recently closed their meeting to the public and students are no longer able to attend board meetings, whereas undergraduate students are the chief shareholders in the Federation of Students and the Board of Directors manages over $2.5 million of student funds annually, whereas the decision to close meetings of the Board of Directors has a negative impact on students and decreases transparency within the Federation of Students, be it resolved that students charge the Federation of Students Board of Directors to reopen their meetings to students effective immediately, and be it further resolved, Students' Council establish a policy for when the Board of Directors may use confidential sessions during meetings. Okay, so we're going to vote on that. All in favor of this motion? Can you keep it high? Really high in the air, folks. And don't put it down even if they've counted you. Keep it high up. You guys are going to poke yourself in the eye. 25? Okay, and against? Opposed to this motion? Take your time, folks. So 26 to 25? Okay, so this motion fails. Okay. Back to the agenda. All right, moving on. So we're going to do the... Yep.
I just said in my understanding of Robert's rules, in order to call the question, you have to be in the speaker's line. That may be incorrect, but that's what I remember. So just for process in the future.
I apologize. This is my first Feds general meeting, so I'm used to sitting in an assembly and raising your placard to get on the first spot on the speakers list available. So that's what I did.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, moving on. So we're going to the next Approval of SLC Marketplace motion. Do we have Shifa Abbas here? Did I say that right? Okay. Okay, so if you'd like to speak to your motion, and then we'll open, sorry? Oh, read it out, sorry. I didn't hear you. Yep, I can read it out. So, whereas tuition and student debt increase annually due to the choices and policies of senior university administrators and governments, whereas a large majority of students face financial hardship and are especially vulnerable to the sales tactics of banks and other financial services companies, whereas the Student Life Center SLC is the only student-managed building on campus and should be as student-friendly and supportive as possible, be it further resolved that the Federation of Students ban for-profit banks and other for-profit financial services companies from using SLC space to solicit students to register for credit cards, including both physical and advertising space, with the only exception being the existing premises of the CIBC branch in the SLC. Be it further resolved that the Federation of Students work with the University of Waterloo administration and advocate to adopt a similar policy on the rest of campus. So I'm just going to get a seconder before you speak to your motion. Do we have a seconder? Can you just say your name?
Dave Beverly Foster.
Thank you. Okay, so you can speak to your motion.
Okay, so I'm Shifa. The purpose of this motion is to set a precedent for the kind of space that we want to create in the SLC. Now that the SLC is managed by feds, we have the opportunity to create a student-friendly space in which we actually serve and provide for students rather than create a space where students are harassed. The SLC space survey had an emphasis on community building. Credit cards are the exact opposite of community building. A large amount of students on campus are suffering from a significant amount of debt and financial stress, and we have the opportunity to support them by creating a place on campus where they aren't encouraged to go into further debt and aren't accosted by companies, encouraged to make decisions that will negatively impact them and cause them further stress. So mental health is a big issue on campus, something that feds, as well as a lot of other great student clubs and groups, have been advocating and campaigning for. And the SLC is the only feds-run space on campus. And I feel, and many other students feel, that it should be easily accessible, conducive to mental health and well-being, and being harassed every time you walk across Vendors Alley does not align with that. So the revenue from the credit card vendors is approximately $15,000, which is less than 1% of Fed's annual revenue. And when considering the support that we provide students by removing these companies from the SLC, it's well worth the loss in revenue. Fed was last year operating on a surplus. So Imprint recently reported that Fed is spending over $30,000 of student money on mapped-in kiosks for the SLC as part of an effort to make SLC more modern. So this is an investment that students had no say over. But if we can't afford this kind of investment into 3 kiosks, surely we can invest money to make the entire building a little bit more student-friendly. We have the opportunity to make it the most student-friendly on campus. To sum up, this motion results in a loss of less than 1% of Fed's annual revenue, and therefore the financial impact is insignificant and something that the corporation can absorb. Furthermore, the Federation of Students has a responsibility to factor in other people's consideration in financial decisions, and we should acknowledge that the credit card companies should not be or do not belong in a building that's meant to serve as a hub for student life on campus.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go with for and against, same. If you'd like to speak for the motion or against the motion on this side. Do we have any speakers?
Hannah N. So basically I would like to also reiterate the idea that I personally as a student feel like the Student Life Center should be a place for student life, not be a credit card company's paradise for nagging students already racked with a lot of student debt. And I don't know about you, but you can probably feel the same way I do, that when I'm walking through Vendors Alley and there are credit card solicitors there, I am trying to avoid eye contact and walk as fastly as I can. Now, this is not promoting a safe space for me within the SLC, a space that I should feel comfortable in as a student, a space that I should be able to go to and de-stress. Be involved in organizing future events, be involved in meeting up with friends, be involved in finding out what actual student groups are up to in Vendors Alley. That's what the space should be used for, creating a student life space. Having credit card companies there is just another way that we're not allowed to actually have ownership over our own building. And I think that's just preposterous. As students, we should have a say over what happens here in the building and not relinquish that to credit card companies and whose only goal is to push us further in debt.
Okay, do we have any other speakers? Okay, if you could just state your name in the microphone for the record. Yeah.
Alhamdawi.
You can adjust it if you'd like.
Okay, that's, let me know if you can hear me. So I'm new to the meeting thing as well, but there's a few points that I'd like to address. The first one is the things that Shifa Abbas mentioned are, there's evidence to what she is saying. You don't need to go to a psychology class to know this. You just need to read an article or two. The feds in the past have constantly mentioned that they are for pro-mental health. In fact, they've gone so far as to say that we like to take active steps towards this. Well, this can be that active step because things in cognitive psychology, and most specifically in cognitive neuroscience and social cognition, has showed that the prime of a credit card or the prime of some financial aspects in terms of like credit cards, banks, even something as a logo can actually increase someone's anxiety. And you might think, well, that's something insignificant. It's not if you consider the amount of people who walk through the SLC, the amount of people who actually have anxiety on campus. So acknowledging this would be acknowledging the existence of anxiety that is prevalent among us, the students. And I would like for you to consider that evidence that supports this motion. Thank you.
Is there any other speakers for or against? We have a for or against, sorry. If you could just state your name one more time.
Adam Savage. I just wanted to speak to diversity and not creating a monopoly inside the SLC. As students, most of us, I guess I'll include myself in that, I've been here for a while, having only CIBC on campus really herds us towards one institution. I would support having more options, more availability, just give you something that you can find information about. Most people don't have access, or most students, I should say, don't have access to cars in their first year. It's hard to get to branches to find out these information. I think it's nice to have it available on campus. And I don't know if the SLC is an appropriate place for it, but I can't think of anywhere else that would be. So I'm for having credit card vendors here.
Okay, thank you. And we have an against, or sorry, for.
It's okay.
Could you just state your name?
Yeah, Rebecca Redden. As for credit card vendors in the SLC, it is true that we have the CIBC downstairs, but that's only really utilized by people who, if they're on campus, like, oh, I'm going to use the ATM, like stuff like that. But all the same, I've heard a lot of people say, like, Fed shouldn't be making financial decisions for us. Yeah, that's true. They shouldn't be making financial decisions for us, so therefore I don't see the point in having credit card vendors because I know where to get a credit card if I want one, and I have the internet now to kind of compare different types of credit card companies, and then also the credit card vendors are just kiosks. They're not necessarily they don't give you financial services on the spot. So if I were interested in them, I could just look up, oh, what are the ones that are featured in Canada, what are the ones featured in Ontario, and go find them on my own. Because I'm an independent student, I'm financially independent, I can go and figure that out by myself, and I don't need feds to tell me which ones. In my head, that is a monopoly, that there are these like credit card companies taking up, monopolizing space in the SLC, when realistically, you could sell that space to somebody else. So that's everything.
Do we have any other speakers? You're saying information? Okay, so I'm going to let the VP Operations and Finance come up and speak to the financial implications of this.
So yeah, I just want to make things clear. I'm not speaking for or against. I just would like to provide this body with a little bit of information. So it was referenced before about the percentage of income that is generated through the SLC marketplace. It's currently just over $120,000 per year. the revenue generated from financial institutions is roughly 12% of that. There's a couple other considerations that need to be had in terms of a tenant that we have within the building, which is CIBC. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but they, by signing the lease, have the right to hold booths in the SLC marketplace. Yeah, so they have a right to advertise and market their service within the building, which includes the SLC marketplace. There's also another agreement not made by feds, but made through the university that affects this motion. That being an agreement between Alumni Affairs, Alumni Relations, and the Bank of Montreal, so BMO. In this agreement, the University of Waterloo receives a percentage of every transaction made by students on credit cards signed through this promotion. So by making this agreement, we can potentially affect this other, or by making this motion, we can potentially affect an agreement made by the university with an external corporation. And I am not 100% sure how legally that will fall out. So I don't know how that will be resolved if this motion passes. And I think that's about it. So the amount that is received by Alumni Affairs that is generated for the university is easily in the tens of thousands of dollars. So, question?
So just a point of clarification as to what you said. Is it possible that feds would be liable if we nicked this deal with BMO? Like, could we get sued?
I don't believe so. I would need to do further investigation, though. I'm not going to say 100% either way because I don't know, and I don't want to jump into that. But there is the possibility. So there is legal ramifications somewhere. I'm just not sure how they play out. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, guys.
Do we have more speakers? Okay, if you could just say your name one more time.
Dave Beverly Foster. I think it's unfortunate that we've made decisions that mean we can't control who gets to advertise in our SLC. I think that was a big mistake, and we should perhaps consider not signing such contracts in the future.
So we have not signed anything.
Just to clarify, the lease that was signed with CIBC was signed like in the 60s. So that was signed between the university and now, because we are now the managing corporation of this building, we have assumed that lease forever. I'm not sure the terms. 10 years? 17 years. So yeah. But that's just how the dust has settled in terms of us taking over the management of the building. So we did not agree to that clause. That was agreed to by the university years ago.
My name is Scott Pearson, and I'm the operations manager for the building. I just want to make a point of clarification.
If you could talk closer.
CIBC's prime purpose is just as a tenant. They do not really do very much credit card solicitation. Any of the marketing that CIBC does is generally just to encourage people to be aware that there is a branch in the building. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Also, to clarify, based on this motion, CIBC is not a part of this. So, exception being the existing premises of the CIC branch.
Yeah. So I think the fact that they haven't historically advertised credit cards kind of makes moot the point that we'd be providing a monopoly to CIBC if we banned credit cards out there. I think it's fair to say that. And I guess that's all I really have to say for now. So.
Do we have any other speakers for or against this motion? Are you raising your hand for or against this motion? Okay. Are you presenting information? I'll recognize it.
Hi. I'm not really for or against this motion. If the body, student body, no longer wants these as a tenant, I mean, you know, that's something that the students want, and we're here to serve, right? So we can make whatever it is that the body agrees upon happen. That's not a problem. I'll just speak to credit cards in general. I think credit cards, first of all, I think every student should realize that credit cards are not meant for long-term loans, and you know they're meant for a short-term, you know, 20 to 30-day period to, you know, for the convenience of not having to. Obviously, you guys know what it is. I'm not explaining what a credit card is. However, I do oversee all the commercial operations for the Federation. Students do use credit cards. It's a part of their daily lives. Over 30% of our transactions at Bomb Shelter, Federation, International News, Wasabi, and so forth are credit card transactions. This is information I'm giving you guys. When it comes to credit cards, I've had a lot of students, I've asked a lot of students, including our staff members, which are all students, part-time staff members, on how they got their first credit card. A lot of them I had the response, my home branch, whether it be TD Scotia or whatever, didn't give me a credit card, and the Bank of Montreal student MasterCard did approve me. That is something to take into consideration. Every bank does have its different ways of assessing your guys' credit score through the bureau.
So if you could just keep it with fact and not
right.
for or against, that would be great.
Yeah, so that's a fact, right? I'm just, as I said, I'm not for or against. This is something to keep into consideration. The other thing that I do, all right, that's not a fact, so I'm not going to say it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any other speakers for or against this motion? Are you speaking for or against this motion?
Motion to amend the motion if it is seen fit. I know for a case, it was said that you want to see student groups. I know that student groups such as clubs are allowed to have 3 days per term that they're allowed to have in the marketplace. Could we have it such that no credit card solicitation is allowed to solicit more than any student group on campus? No.
So are you moving to amend that?
Moving to amend it such that no credit card solicitation is allowed to happen more than any student group has.
So where are you editing? We just need to be able to put the change in just to see it, and then we'll vote on it.
Okay. Not necessarily a ban, but no, don't cut anything just in case.
We're not. We have undo. Don't worry.
Be it resolved that the Federation of Students does not allow for-profit banks or other for-profit financial services companies from using the SLC space to solicit students to register for credit cards. Actually, just at the end of that whole paragraph, just say more than any student group is allowed to use said space.
So once the motion is completely, the amendment is completely laid out.
Any student. Okay.
Then we'll get a seconder for the amendment, and then we'll debate it, and then we'll vote on that, and then we'll go back to the original motion. Would you like me to read out your amendment in the whole motion, or just that be it resolved? So be it resolved that the Federation of Students ban for-profit banks and other for-profit financial services companies from using SLC space to solicit students to register for credit cards, including both physical and advertising space, with the only exception being the existing premises of the CIBC branch and SLC. More than any student group is allowed to use the space. Do we have a seconder for this amendment? Hogg. So we're going to vote on this amendment, but do we have any debate on this amendment? Again, for this amendment, against this amendment? Say your last name for the record.
Abbas. So the point of the motion was to kick these credit card companies out of the SLC. It wasn't to, the problem at the beginning was not that the credit card companies were taking space away from student clubs. There's plenty of space. It's just that credit card companies and their solicitation don't align with what we should be, what the students feel that the space should be used for. So this amendment doesn't make sense according to like the intentions behind the first motion, or like how the motion was submitted.
Are you speaking against or for? Against?
Dave Beverly Foster. I agree with everything she said, and I just want to say something technical about the wording. I think we should just, if we're going to do this, limit it to 3 days.
Are you making an amendment to the amendment?
Can we vote on the amendment and then I can try changing it?
Mover, do you consider his amendment friendly? Yes. Okay. Could you say it into the mic too, just before you go over?
Rather than more than any student group is allowed to use the space, more than 3 days, just so it's less ambiguous. 3 days, what is the rule for student groups? 3 days per term.
I'm just going to identify Scott for point of information on your question.
Student groups are allowed 3 days per event. So if they have 10 events, they could be advertised 30 times as long as there's space. They're also allowed 3 general booths, 3 dates per month for general information, like just get to know our club. So student groups are there more than anyone else.
So are you retracting your amendment to the amendment? Our mover, it was seconded, so we do have to actually vote on it. It just can be voted down. Is anybody opposed to retracting this amendment? Seeing none, it's retracted. Okay, so we are now talking about the original motion. Is anybody want to continue to speak for or against this motion? Again, for this motion, against this motion. Point of order. Okay, so we have a request to count quorum. So if everyone could raise their placards and we are going to count. Could you raise your placards really high for me? Really high if you have a placard. Really high. I have exactly 50. I didn't cut you guys. Sorry. Okay, so we are at 53. So we have quorum and we're going to continue the debate. So, sorry, do we have any more speakers for or against? For this motion, against this motion, just state your name one more time.
Alhamdawi. I just noticed while paying attention that how you present information can actually be for, even though you don't actually explicitly say something. For example, if I begin with X, and I end with Y and Y rather than beginning with X, Y.
So are you speaking for this motion or?
Yeah. So then the thing I want to emphasize though is that the financial part of this debate has been brought up, and I'd like to emphasize that it's not actually a financial constraint on Fed. Okay, so thank you.
Is anybody else speaking for or against this motion? Seeing none, so we're going to vote on this motion. Point. Okay. We're going to run a mic back to you.
I just wanted to know if this seems like check. This seems like if this is a big student issue, I just have a question, to either the mover or to the chair. Was this issue brought up to student council
No, this
at any time?
within my year, it has not been brought up to Students' Council. I can't speak to before that. Is there any other comments? Okay, so we're going to vote on this motion. All those in favor of this motion, would anybody like me to read it again? Okay, all in favor of this motion, please raise your placards. And opposed? Thirty-six to 18. 36 to 18, motion passes. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, we have approval of SLC accessibility motion. Is Amy Yang here? Amy Yang is not here. Do we have a mover for this motion?
Redden?
Okay, do we have a seconder for this motion? And mover, would you like to speak to your motion?
Should we read it out, or?
Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
Whereas the Student Life Center SLC is managed by the Federation of Students, whereas the SLC should seek to set an example as the only student-managed building on campus, whereas the students of the University of Waterloo are concerned with the inaccessibility of the Student Life Center, in particular the accessibility of the entrance facing the PAC parking lot, be it resolved that the Federation of Students work with the UW administration to upgrade the SLC entrance facing the PAC parking lot to one that is accessible and automatic by August 2015, and be it further resolved that the Federation of Students complete an accessibility audit of the SLC be done completed by April 1st, 2015. And would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Redden. Wanted to apologize for Amy not being here. She's on co-op, so not able to be here. Yeah, so originally our proposal was because a lot of students had noticed that there was some other students were having trouble with the fact that the doors on that side are not accessible. And kind of after talking with a bunch of other students, we had noticed that other parts of the SLC as well were a little bit more inaccessible, or kind of just like a labyrinth of pathways that you're like, I don't know. So coming to that conclusion, we had seen that it seemed a little bit offensive actually that the doors on that side were inaccessible, because it kind of insinuates that people without legs would not be using that door, whereas like people who had immobility in their legs would not be using that door. But however, it kind of disregards the fact that there is a spectrum of disabilities, and a lot of those disabilities can be invisible, and a lot of them need alternate ways of getting around. And if we really want to be like a really good student-governed building, we would like put into effect all the different types of abilities within this school and within the ways that our super large population of students has to orient themselves around a building. So that's why Amy had suggested doing a complete accessibility audit after rectifying the situation with the doors over there. And so that's basically it. Yeah, that's the beginning of the motion.
Do we have anybody speaking for or against this motion? For on this side, against on this side? We have someone speaking for. If you could just say your last name for the record.
Chris Lowless. So I agree with the spirit of this motion entirely. Like, I would certainly not suggest that this building is accessible. I just have a question or a concern about the timeline here, and maybe one of the executive can comment on that, about the audit being done by April 1st, 2015. I don't know if that's enough time or if it's going to result in a not very good quality audit, so maybe one of the executive can comment on how that timeline would fit in and the quality of that audit. Perhaps Balfour, if he's here, can comment on that, because it would probably fall under your portfolio.
So as information purposes, VP Operations and Finance Balfour will comment.
Can you repeat that?
So if this passes and you have a deadline of April 1st, 2015 for the audit, is that enough time to do a solid job on the audit? Or, like, I'm just concerned that it's cutting it close based on what I know you're also doing, and I don't want us to do a shoddy job on this.
Yes, I would agree. I would not feel comfortable saying that I can get that done in this time frame, based on all the other projects that are on the go right now. And if I can say once again, like, I'm not for or against. I can agree that the SLC space is not exactly accessible from that parking lot, but I wouldn't feel comfortable agreeing to that timeline. If I were to suggest, but I don't know. I don't know who's going to be in office next time around. So, like, I can't really suggest how quickly it could be done.
Okay.
But
Thank you. Is that all your comments?
I would consider saying just like a report of the progress on the audit be done by April 1st.
Are you making an amendment?
I'm just nods. Are people okay with that? Ish, maybe?
Very official.
Okay, all right. So then I'll move that an accessibility audit be done and a progress report be completed by April 1st, 2015. Sorry. And a deadline of...
Sorry, we're just listening to this amendment, sorry. Okay, so
You can add that in after.
do need someone to write that down, but I will just type it. Thanks, Maz. Could you repeat your amendment one more time, please?
So I would like to insert a progress report B after, so next line. So accessibility audit be done and a progress report be completed by April 1st, 2015. Can you just underline that?
Can you underline it? Okay, do we have a seconder for this amendment? Turner? Any debate on this amendment? For this amendment, against this amendment? Just state your name, please.
Dave Beverly Foster, I'm not against the spirit of this amendment, but I think a clause should be added for a specific
Are you making an amendment to the amendment?
Nods.
Would you rather wait until the amendment's done, or would you like to amend the amendment?
I don't know. I
Because
think
then just for clarification, we'll have to vote on your amendment and
Yeah.
then the amendment and then the motion.
I don't know how to do it.
Or you could just, if you wait until the amendment's passed, then you can amend the original motion if that passes. Does that make sense? We'll walk you through it, don't worry. Okay, so any debate on this amendment? So you're for this amendment?
Yeah.
Say your name, please.
Rebecca Redden. I'd just like to say that this is a friendly amendment. I think that as long as the first thing is finished and completed, that shows a pretty good progress. And as Ben had stated to me as well, that like, since that would be when he has done his term, he can't exactly give a deadline to the next person until they're like ready, until they go over the progress. So I think that makes a lot of
Okay, so
sense.
any other
Unless-
debate
hold on.
for or against this amendment? Are you, we've seconded it, so we'll have to vote. Okay, we're going to pull this back to order. Sir? Are you speaking for this motion, or amendment, sorry?
Let's vote.
Okay, any other debate on this amendment? All those in favor of this amendment? The underlined text? All those opposed? It passes. Okay, so now this is the original motion, the entire motion. So the underlined text is no longer underlined, it's part of the original motion. Does anybody want to make any other amendments now? Okay. I don't want to give you my mic.
I would propose that a clause be added that the progress report include a deadline that the audit has to be completed by, so it doesn't just drag on for eternity.
So the progress report needs a deadline?
And a progress report including a deadline for the audit be completed by.
So in the progress report, you want a deadline for the audit?
Yeah.
So he's just going to put some text. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? So you're going to stick with your amendment and not ask the audience?
Yeah, I do want
to. Okay. Any seconder for this amendment? Do you have a microphone? If you could just state your last name.
Wang.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any debate on this amendment? For this amendment, against this amendment? Seeing none. So are you against this amendment?
I am. Okay. And just for the exact same reasons that we were just having a conversation, in that if I'm giving a progress report on April 1st and setting a deadline, that means I'm setting a deadline for somebody who's not even in office yet, right? Like I'm setting a deadline for somebody that's not me, and I don't know that that's fair. So, what's that? Well, what I read from that is when I give an update, I'm giving an update with, hey, this is going to be done at this point in time, right? That's what you guys are trying to get at. So if I'm done April 30th or 31st.
Are you making an amendment to this amendment?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm speaking against it. Sorry,
okay.
I don't know that we've actually put it up.
Okay. Any other debate on this amendment? Okay, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of this amendment? All those opposed? High in the air, folks, high in the air. So it fails. So it's now the underlined text will disappear and we have the original motion. Is there any other debate for this motion, against this motion? Okay, you come up and say your name, please. Are you for or against?
I'm for this. It's more of a clarification though. Is the use of the word automatic, does that mean that an accessible wheelchair ramp, for lack of a better term, would be
So I'm going to call on the mover to comment on that.
Yeah, so I'm fairly certain that Amy's intent for this was just to have an automatic door. Like just a door, not necessarily a ramp. A ramp is like, if you want to put a ramp, that's pretty cool. But like, I mean, just the door is fine.
Is there any other debate for or against this motion? For this motion, if you could just state your last name for the record.
Turner. I am for this motion. However, I do have one concern that, according to this, or the way I see it, the population of students will bear the cost of paying for the audit, and I don't think Fed have to pay for that. I think that's the university's responsibility, since we wouldn't have to pay for any building repairs or maintenance in the first place. So I'd like to amend the final be it further resolved statement to include that the Federation of Students complete an accessibility audit paid for by the University of the SLC. The trouble is there's no way. No, sorry, the question was if I'm expecting the renovation to be paid for. I'm also expecting the audit to be paid for. Yes, I'm expecting both.
So we just have to be recognized by the chair. Do you have a question? Is it? Okay.
can we, like, would it make sense to add another be it resolved speaking to where the funding is coming from?
I think that would be better, just because the way I worded that was kind of unclear.
So could you state your amendment?
Oh, that's going to be tough. And be it further resolved that that the University of Waterloo pays for the audit, or any expenditures involved in this motion. The University of Waterloo pays for any expenditures involved in this motion.
Do you have a point of...
I have a point of order in that we are feds. We can't tell the university to pay for things.
Well,
the motion can't be fed like we command the university to pay for an audit.
Hold on. Would you like to change your amendment based on that fact?
I absolutely would. Sorry, I was just reiterating what was said. I'm not sure how to make this. I don't know how we can enforce this, and that's the point. But I don't think that feds should be paying for the audit. So maybe be it further resolved that feds not incur the costs of.
Okay, so do you have an amendment?
Can I offer his amendment?
So are you speaking in favor and then offering your own amendment?
Can we just present the amendment?
So just speak in favor of the motion and say your amendment.
Okay, can the amendment just be it further resolved that the Federation of Students advocates to the university to pay for the funding for the audit and the construction?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Be it further resolved that the Federation of Students advocates the University of Waterloo to pay for the funding for the accessibility audit and the upgrades.
Hear, hear.
It spells out, right? Can you just come over and repeat what you said to the impromptu secretary? So I'm going to read it one more time. That be it further resolved, the Federation of Students advocates for the University of Waterloo to pay for the accessibility audit and the upgrades. So do we have a seconder for this amendment? Yasin, do we have any debate on this amendment for or against? Okay, if you could state your last name, please.
Lolis. Obviously, I'm not going to speak against for the university paying for something, but I just kind of have a question about what kind of audit are we expecting this to be? Like,
so is this in relation to the amendment or the original motion?
Sorry, no.
Is there any other debate on the amendment? There is? Okay. You're for this amendment? State your last name, please.
I'd just like to point out that under Policy 65, the university does have to proactively make efforts towards integrating people with physical disabilities. So I think that it would be realistic for the university to pay for some of this, so I am in favor of the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any other debate on this amendment? Okay, seeing none. Are you standing up for debate? No. All those in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards. All those opposed? Motion or amendment passes. So now we are back to the original motion. Is there any other debate? Now the underlined text is now actually part of the motion. Do we have any debate for or against this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards. All those opposed? Motion passes. Great. Moving on to the next amendment of the bylaws. So if we could just pull that up. I'm just going to read it out. It's at the top. There you go. So resolve the Board of the Directors' purpose state the Board of Directors shall primarily discuss and make operational management decisions relating to the legal, financial, human resources, high-level organizational strategy, and long-range planning of the Federation of Students. Do we have a mover for this? Lolis? A seconder? Balfour? And would you like to speak to your motion?
Lolis, I just want to emphasize that this does absolutely nothing to the power of board. This is under the purpose of our bylaws, so it doesn't give or take away any powers of board. All it is for when a student reads through our bylaws and they're wondering what does board do, this is more clarification of the kind of things it deals with. Right now, the purpose just says deals with the management of the Federation of Students. This gives some more concrete examples. It's purely aesthetic. It doesn't actually change our day-to-day operations.
Is anybody for or against this motion? For, against? Seeing none. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your placards. All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. And last item on the agenda is the Federation of Students Long Range Plan report. It's a presentation. So this is not the final long range plan report, and I'll go into this because I'll be talking to this presentation. So earlier this year, the Federation of Students hired an external organization to put together its long range plan and run student consultation. So within that student consultation, I'll read out that Feds engaged with over 1,400 students over 4 months to learn about their experiences, needs, and challenges. We had focus groups, in-person surveys around campus, and an online short answer survey. And the committee worked to understand the goals of students and what they need to achieve them. And based on the belief that student goals should align with the goals of students, members of the Fed's executive board and staff, and then crafted these strategic directions from that student consultation. And so I'm going to read the 6 strategic directions that the consultation produced. And then in the next coming weeks, we will be approving the long-range plan at the board level, and that will be released on our website. So if you could go next. So again, there's 6. I'll just read them out. Feds will focus its organizational identity to better encourage U-Waterloo spirit. Feds will proactively improve relations external to the university community. Feds will increase the relevancy of its services and programs to reach a broader base of students. 4, Feds will improve collaboration with the university and hold them accountable to students. 5, Feds will become a more efficient organization to better the member experience. And finally, 6, Feds will empower and support students as leaders. Okay, so these are the 6 strategic directions of the plan, and it will be released soon, so keep an eye out on the website, and we'll release a new story as well. Seeing as there is no other items on the agenda, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Yasin. Do we have a seconder? Gafour. So any debate on this motion? Not debatable. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned.